Welcome, everybody, to the show. This is Counterclipping Show number 171 for May 6th, 2024. I apologize for missing the show last week, but our bandwidth from Buckeye Gamefest, which went very well, and I'll have a full but hopefully brief report this evening, did prohibit that from occurring. So we were not able to... the bandwidth there was, I was pulling like 1 to 1.5 megabits per second, and that is far short of the absolute minimum of about 5 that I would otherwise need. So rather than force everyone to sit through a crappy show, we decided to just not do it. So hopefully that is okay, but we are back this week. We'll be back tomorrow with the Chit Show. So before we get started, our topic tonight is the best of GMT, and we're really kind of going to go through over the course of a number of these, because it's going to take a while, because there's a lot there. We're going to kind of go through the whole catalog and see what we have of stuff that has been released. I might stop at some point when we get close to now so that people can have the appropriate time and perspective to digest some of those more recent things. But in the meantime, we're going to go through 91, I think it is, to 95 today. So I want to thank everybody for coming out. Do thumbs up the video and subscribe to the channel if you are not already subscribed. And I want to give a shout out to the patrons of Ardwulf, Lair, without whose support and encouragement we wouldn't be able to keep doing this, especially right now. And we'll have a full report on that as well. As well as to Lee Grant, who stepped up to the hero level as a hero level patron. So Lee, thanks very much. The support is much appreciated. So we are clipping. I cannot get the box to stand up over here. We are clipping what we were going to be clipping last week, which is the decision version of War Between the States. Center nibs on the counters. Other than that, it's a perfectly good game. But we have a full report on Buckeye Gamefest, and I'll talk. I don't have any pictures or footage of any of that, so we'll talk about a couple of things. But before we get going, and we are drinking something that was presented to me at Buckeye Gamefest. Thank you very much. You know who you are. This is Michter Small Batch Bourbon. It is bottled at 45.7%, which is very respectable. And it doesn't say this on the label, but it tastes like it's got a lot of wheat in it, which I personally like. So I don't have a problem with that. So let's give a shout out here. Oh, I should also give a shout out. We'll hear from them later, of course. To Noble Lake Games. The sponsors of the Counterclipping Show. It's been a very long week, folks, especially considering the shenanigans that happened before we departed for Buckeye Gamefest. So before we go any further with that, let's say hello to Alan Salazar, Alistair Logie, Biasia Atkins. Thanks for coming by. Bayonet Brant from the Armchair Dragoons, which is one of several people I got to hang out with less than I wanted to over this course of the last week. Bill Simoni, Brent McCabe, Carl Fung, thanks for stopping by. Carl, Chad Kennedy, Dewen Nard, Daniel Silverthorne, David Imperato, David Zell, Ed Holtzman, Eric Goebel, Eric Hansen, Gronyard Rich, HUN644 New, the legend himself, Fucko, is here. Jeff Anderson, Jeff Beeler, Jeffrey Edwards, Joe Okabayashi, John Stanley, John Clark, Joseph Hammond, Kyle Harris, Lee Grant, Mark McNair, Meandering Mike, Michael Evanzini, Michael Karlowski, Mike Berticelli, Palmer, Eldridge, Paul Sin, Perfidious Albion, Sean Turno, Stacky Limit, Todd Cox, Vicky, Vincenzo Beretta, William Bird, Winterson, and Wolf Dog. And Andrew Cook has popped in, and B. New have popped into the chat before I managed to roll that away. So I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Looks like Andrew has had bad luck with the deluxe clipper. So by premium clipper, I mean the one that doesn't break all the time. But it is a little trickier to use, let's face it. All right, so before we get into any of that, let me talk about the event that occurred last Saturday. So I spent Monday through Saturday, meaning last Monday, a week before today, to just a couple days ago Saturday at Buckeye Gamefest in Columbus, Ohio. We had a great time. I'll have pictures and all that stuff in a couple of moments. However, that Saturday, we had a flood in the basement. So what happened is that there is on the front of the house, there is an outdoor spigot. And when that spigot turned on, some of the output leaked into the basement. Now, all the games were off the floor with a couple exceptions that I'll mention in a minute. But I did not count on water coming in from the ceiling So what ended up happening was the water sensor, I have water sensors on the floor, went off when the water hit it, which was at least an hour later. But if I hadn't had the sensor, I wouldn't have found it for another few hours after that, and the situation would have been even worse. So all the shelves are off the floor as they should be in a basement, but I had not gotten around to buying a dehumidifier yet. Water comes in about a third of the game room and then leaking into the office. There was about a quarter to a half an inch of water on the floor. And right under where all this water came in from the ceiling, I had this folding table, and on the folding table were a couple of games that I had been working on, one of which was Dead of Winter, which was the copy of the game we were going to play at Buckeye Gamefest. Let me get the banner up. I didn't update the banner, though. So there's 3 games on that, and a bunch of crap that could just be thrown away with a clear conscience. There were 3 games on that shelf: Rebel Fury, Dead of Winter, and Death Valley. Rebel Fury got hit a bit. The box had a soaked spot on it, but the box was closed. The interior contents were fine. We set it out in a dry place over the rest of the week, and Rebel Fury is going to be fine with no meaningful damage to the components. There's a tiny bit of wrinkling on the cover. Death Valley got splashed, but nothing serious, and I wiped it off and said it looks fine, looked at the contents, and it was fine miraculously. Death Valley, on the other hand, the box was sitting open because I have for the last several months been meticulously clipping and organizing the counters into 3D printed counter trays. So the box basically filled up as though you had poured a gallon of water into it, and the counters completely disintegrated. Now, the box and the maps and some of the other stuff got wet too. Those have dried out and are probably salvageable, but the box is trash and the counters are trash. So scratch one copy of Death Valley. I guess I did a video on this. Maybe folks saw that, but it was, not awesome. So I did call GMT earlier today, and it turns out that even though the game itself, Death Valley, is out of stock, they do have some extra counters, which they were kind enough to send me. So big shout out to GMT for having very good customer service at this time of crisis. I think that the counters, but not the maps for the expansion were actually okay because they were in a couple of counter trays because I hadn't sorted them yet. That was actually what I was stuck on. So I think it is okay. But, one game could have been worse. However, the lesson learned here was very important in that a couple of things happened. One, I had Jackson and Corinth on the floor right here behind me the previous day, and I had picked it up and put it on the game table because I wanted to put it on the shelf because it's ready to go now. So it's only that saved a potentially very expensive game from getting totally wrecked. The carpet in here, it's carpet squares, right? I didn't pay a lot for any of the carpet in here. The carpet in the game room are those like indoor-outdoor rugs that you get like at Lowe's or Home Depot. They're like $15 a piece, completely soaked through. The carpet squares in here were completely soaked through, and I pulled as much as I could out to the driveway to dry out, at which point immediately it started raining and the birds started shitting on the carpet sitting in the driveway. So there's that. But there is furniture in here on some of these carpet squares in this room, right? So I couldn't take the bookcases apart to take it out. So I got one of those carpet fans. We had one of those carpet fans. Let me be specific about that. And the next day I went and bought a dehumidifier, which sucked an enormous amount of water out of the air in here. So the lesson learned here is we're going to need to relocate this office to one of the spare bedrooms upstairs. The game room can stay where it is because games on the table are fine. And frankly, the wall of games is all like 8 inches off the floor. I'm reasonably happy with that. I will, of course, power wash. The carpet squares were $3 a piece at a literal thrift store. I'm probably just throwing them away and replacing them. The rug we will relocate. It's an indoor-outdoor thing anyway, and I'll just use it for outdoor purposes from now on, at which point it doesn't matter if the birds poop on it or not. So Andrew Cook says spray for mold and mildew. Yes, but I need to get this room emptied first. And that's gonna be a project. So we have an extra spare bedroom. Okay. So that's where, and actually my wife and I had already talked about relocating the office up there anyway. So we're going to do that. Now it is going to take some money to do that because I'm going to need to replace these shelves. These are the cheap Walmart particle board shelves, and they absorb a considerable amount of water, and I don't trust them to not fall over on me literally while we're doing this show. The only thing that has probably saved me so far is that the only things that are on it are the relatively light board games and not the much, much heavier RPG stuff, which is over here, which incidentally is only an inch off the floor, which I am not pleased with. So I'm going to be, let's say we'll be starting another campaign asking for folks' help to help pay for that. It's going to be Billy bookcases all the way around, and it's going to be a nicer filming area anyway, which was on my list of things to do for this year. Just would rather it not have been pushed on me quite like this. So your support is appreciated. And remember, everybody that is here tonight is, in fact, supporting the show, and I do very much appreciate it. So I am actually okay with plumbing stuff. We're going to have to get a plumber to look at this this outdoor spigot, though, and I'm not sure what that'll cost. I thought this exact thing, by the way, that thank goodness it wasn't Campaign for North Africa. That would have sucked ass. But it was, and then like the next day I had to pack everything up. And so here's the problem, though. The sump I keep a close eye on the sumps because if the power goes out, then it's a serious concern. There are 2 sumps in this basement, and I do need a backup, a battery backup for the sumps in case the power goes out. But that wouldn't have helped here because it's on like the opposite side of the room and it just flowed into my office rather than flowing toward the sump, right? So that would, the water would have eventually drained, but it could have sat in here for like a couple of days, let alone if it had happened when I was out of town, which would have been even worse, possibly way, 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 way worse, because my wife does not come down here unless I've specifically instructed her to come down here. So not out of anything weird. It's just that she, has acknowledged that this is my space, and that's that. So we have a perfectly usable basement, and we will continue to have a perfectly usable basement, and I will repurpose this room for something. But the office, and therefore the filming area, will end up upstairs, and it will just work a lot better. It will look nicer, and I will not have to worry about water. So that sucked. So anyway, that aside, I do have some pictures from Buckeye Gamefest. I do not have an update from the campaign for Noble Knight credit for the finished trilogy. I keep wanting to call it the Winter Trilogy, just because they haven't done the paperwork yet. So we'll hopefully have that by next week, but we'll see. But otherwise, everything there is going swimmingly. So lots of other folks with water damage and other miscellaneous damage stories in the chat here. And obviously, you folks have my sympathy as well. This is absolutely true, that what William Aarons is saying here. It's underground, right? You're always susceptible to flooding. So, unfortunately, I didn't keep any games out in the shed that's been hit by 2 trees now. Oh boy. Thank you, Chad Canady. Big time. Thank you so much. That is much appreciated. This... Don't think that this is not under consideration at this point. So a couple things happened over the past couple of weeks, including Stack Academy in Montreal and apparently GMT East, which Marty says was excellent, which I'm happy to hear. And by the way, Marty, we're talking about this is just talk right now, but we're talking about doing Winter's Victory at Buckeye Gamefest next year. We'll see if that actually happens. So I needed to buy a humidifier anyway. I had been dragging my feet on that. I stopped dragging my feet, went to Costco and bought a dehumidifier. Basically the same dehumidifier that Lowe's was selling for $110 more. It's a fairly high-end dehumidifier, and man, it sucked a lot of water out of here. I've got to... the game room will stay down here because I'm not worried about the game table. There's actually no wood in contact with the floor on the game table. I have casters on the feet, so they are not going to... I'm not worried about that at all. And there doesn't seem to be any idiotic plumbing like right above the game table either. So while the game table and the game room will stay down here, And some of the games will, right? That one wall will stay where it's at, although I'm going to reorganize it, obviously, because all the RPG stuff, all the books type stuff, it's all going upstairs. I'm not dealing with this again. So anyway, I might need a second dehumidifier. That's probably a fair statement. I'm spitballing this, but it's approximately a 1,200 square foot basement. But that's probably a good idea. There are, after all, 2 sump pumps, and I gotta think about a battery backup system on those, as I mentioned, because if the power goes out, it's a serious problem. Now, if I'm here, I got a generator. It's not a whole house generator, but I got a generator. I could plug the sump pumps into that. There is no drop ceiling. There is a drywall ceiling in here and in the game room, and then just rafters in the rest of the basement. So, I mean, this would be awesome, but I don't think any of us can actually count on that, to say the least. All right. So let's do the Buckeye Gamefest pictures right now. So this is very early in the day. This would have been Monday. Buckeye Gamefest, I don't know what the total attendance was. I'm not sure if they announced it. But the War Room attendance was noticeably up. There were about 22 people in there on Monday. That is definitely a record. We do not normally, usually the Monday crowd is like 7 or 8. So we had 2 or 3 times that this time. So at the table here, you can see some of the Columbus locals or former Columbus locals, as well as Doug from the Tabletop's Edge, who was playing a Union command. This went very well. We got through most of the first day. We didn't reach a point where I would say the battle was over. We got to, 2 or 3 p.m. on December 31st, 1862, and the Union right wing had been thoroughly mauled at this time. Well, the other thing is that mold can get trapped behind stuff. So that's kind of my concern. This wall right here, where the bookshelves are on it, is a drywall wall. That's an actual wall that's like in the middle of the basement. So I'm not really worried about that at all. But these bookshelves are up against, actually, that's another drywall wall too. But I want to pull all the stuff away from the walls in this room, is where I'm going with that. So you can get water sensors that will send you notifications on an app. I have some old water sensors that were left us by the previous folks. And there is an audible alarm. That is actually why we heard it. The notification is an email notification, which is not incredibly useful. I don't check email that fastidiously. Brant says that the number he got was about 400, which sounds like it's a little more than last year. Everybody had a great time that I talked to. And we'll go through a lot of these with the pictures. Mr. John Madison, thanks for stopping by. Sump alarm, yes, this is absolutely necessary as well. Yeah, well, this is now legal in Ohio, right? I guess, I don't know. All right, so there's 2 really noteworthy things here that we saw on tables at Buckeye Gamefest, like a lot on tables. One of those things was GMT's downfall. This is the John Butterfield and Chad Jensen co-design that was published posthumously, unfortunately, for Chad. And as I've predicted, there were 6 games of this going at various times during the convention. So, yeah. This was, I wasn't even going to ask this question. Oh, look at Fucko had 421. So it was a little over 400, it sounds like. They may have numbered starting with the staff, though. That's possible. So they might not necessarily have started at number 1. But as mentioned, we saw 6 games, might even have been more than that, but I counted 6 games of Downfall being played throughout the week. And normally these were played and packed up in a day or 2, something like that. So big hit. Another thing that was a big hit and that there were also 6 games of was BCS. There were 4 games of AeroCorps, 1 game of the Golan Heights map from Valley of Tears, and there was another one too. I think somebody had a 1-map Brazen Chariots game set up as well. So BCS also hitting it big here at Buckeye Gamefest. And for those who don't know, I will mention that I and a co-conspirator will be running BCS Brazen Chariots as our big marquee event at Origins, which we will talk about in greater detail as it gets closer. But it is not that far away. It's about 6 weeks away at this point. So Mark McNair was there. Mark, it was great to meet you. Wish we could have gotten into game together, but that was not to be since I was in one game basically the whole week, plus a couple other miscellaneous things, which I'll get to in a minute. This is a game of Starfleet battles. There were a couple of these that busted out earlier on in the week. So the folks who got to play that had fun with that. I usually get to play this at Winterfest personally, is my usual one game a year of Starfleet battles. This is Tolva. I don't know how the hell you pronounce that, but this is a Battle of the Winter War. And it is a playtest map. This is the CSS system from Adam Starkweather and Compass Games. So pretty interested in seeing this. Ken Reppel brought this. Ken is the designer, if you don't know, of 1812 War on the Great Lakes Frontier. And Ken himself, I think Ken's helping develop this or something. Maybe he's just a playtester. I don't know. But Ken's got a number of projects in the pipeline in various places. I'm not sure what this game is going to be called, but there's going to be like a Saratoga campaign game coming out that Gilbert Collins is developing from Compass that I am particularly interested in seeing. This I had not seen previously. So Sean Torno, Sean, thanks for stopping. Thanks for coming, and thanks for stopping by tonight. Yeah, pretty much. Mark was in the Starfleet Battles game. That's fantastic. Yeah, there's actually in Columbus. There's actually a long-running Starfleet Battles group that meets, I think, monthly. I've been to one or two of their things, then I moved away, so I can't really go now. Well, I can, but I'm not. But other than that, let me fix this. Hold on a second here. There we go. That's a better shot at this point. All right, so next up here is more action at Stones River. Dead of Winter is the GBACW, Great Battles of the American Civil War, entry on the Battle of Stones River or Murfreesboro. This happens over the change of year, December 31st, 1862 to January 2nd, 1863, historically. The Union gets caught, as happened a number of times, with their pants down. Historically, the Union right got absolutely mauled. I'm not sure historically they got mauled quite as badly as I mauled them. I was playing the Confederates I was playing the Confederate left, basically. So this was my mess to clean up. But a great time was had by all. So this is the view out of the hotel room, which I thought was a nice view. This is the junk sitting in the hallway at the convention center. There's me looking irritable because I hadn't had enough coffee yet. Here is the Golan Heights map game of Valley of Tears. These folks seemed to enjoy it. Here's some more stuff from Stones River. A More Perfect Union. This is a game that is in development, and this is a John Lapham game, and it's coming out from Catastrophe Games. Looks reasonably intriguing from what little I saw of it. Sean got to play Starfleet Battles, BCS, GBACW. There was a second GBACW game of one of the smaller battles from Death Valley. I almost cried when somebody busted that out, just to kind of try and tune up with some other people to tune up with the system. And they appear to have had fun with it too. It is a pretty heavy system, but once you get into the flow of it, it actually works pretty well. Cthulhu DMD. I'm not sure what that is. Is that a board game? And Downfall. And we'll get to the guest stars in a couple of minutes. John Stanley, thank you so much. Much appreciated. We did not have any playtesting of Chancellorsville or Wilderness games, but I believe I have a picture here of some Rebel Fury play that did happen at Buckeye Gamefest. I'm not sure which battle that was off the top of my head. This is a Triumph and Tragedy. This is a very good game. And if I didn't say this, John Stanley, thank you for the support. It is much appreciated and will be put to good use buying bookshelves, I'm afraid. So there's that. I worked it out. I actually took measurements of the room earlier today, and I'm going to need 9 Billy bookcases to get everything up there. So, but in any case, Triumph and Tragedy, terrific game. This is something from Blue Panther printed, and I don't remember what it is. Somebody in the chat or Brant will know what this was. I am drawing a blank, but it's a clearly Civil War something or other. This is my lunch from when we went to North Market. It was excellent. Here is some more Stones River action of the Confederate left. The Union was screening that flank with cavalry, but the Confederates have a lot more cavalry, and there's slightly better cavalry at this point in the war. So Brant mentions, we got a picture of this, Dawn's Early Light from Lock and Load. And this, once again, is almost the same shot from Stones River. Here's another shot from later in the day of Valley of Tears. Here is East Front. So this got set up as kind of like just we're going to explore the game type of situation. They played it for about a day and then didn't pick it up for a couple of days. So this is from Columbia Games. It is a traditional Columbia block game. I have actually played this a long time ago now, the East Front version anyway. And it's a pretty interesting system, actually. At some point, I will do video on it. Here's me staring out the window. This is Normandy 44, another excellent game. This is the other game of GBACW that was kind of run as a training or learning game. Here's Blue Panther, who was there in the war room as a vendor. You'll see Grant's back there. That's Grant from the Player's Aid. And there's Steve over here from Blue Panther, and Alexander sitting down here. And I'm not sure if I can make anybody else out. I did buy 4 games from Blue Panther, 3 from Hollenspiel, 1 from White Dog, and I would have bought at least 1 more had it been available and not just a demo copy. We'll see that in a minute. Here is a different game of Downfall that got played. Here is another shot of A More Perfect Union, which will, again, be coming out from Catastrophe Games at some point in the not terribly unreasonable future. Here is Thin Red Line Games on a table, Die Festung Hamburg. This did get set up and noodled with. I'm not sure how far they got, what scenario they played or anything like that, but I was busy the rest of the day, but I did get a picture of when they had just thrown the plexi on the map. A handsome looking game. Here's another shot of the Blue Panther sales area. They had, of course, stuff from Hollenspiel, White Dog, Blue Panther themselves, Catastrophe Games, the Historical Game Company, Red Sash Games, which is doing kind of mini monsters on a print-on-demand format. So they like the most expensive thing that Blue Panther sells. But there's also a lot of stuff in those games as well, and those are kind of down here. I've got a somewhat frightening amount of these personally. So I bought Our God Was My Shield and Mac and Lee. Those are the John Tyson operational games from Hollenspiel. I also bought the Gift of the Nile, right? Gift of the Nile, which is a Ben Madison solitaire Ancient Egypt game, which looks interesting. And what was the other one that I bought? The other one that I bought was Beware the Ides of March, which is Roman Republic stuff. So that looks pretty cool as well. So here's yet another game of Downfall that was just getting set up at this time. This is a game called, what was this? It's obviously Civil War. I'm trying to remember what this was called, and I don't remember what this was called, but it was Civil War, so, I'm interested. Here are some faces you might recognize, folks. We have here, clockwise from lower right, we've got Grant from the Player's Aid. We've got Mr. Herman Lettman, who we were delighted to have at Buckeye Gamefest. We've got ID Jester himself, who showed up for a couple of days, and Alexander from the Player's Aid. And here is all of them making stupid faces, except for Alexander, who is making his regular face. They're playing Plum Island Horror here, Herman's new, I don't want to say newest game, because Herman releases like 2 games a month. And this is like 6 months old at this point, but a relatively recent release, and Herman's latest from GMT anyway. And everybody says this is tons of fun, which I am completely prepared to believe. This is Dawn's Early Light from Lock and Load. It's a handsome game. It is, I'm not really sure. I assume this to be some kind of near future hypothetical deal, but that is an assumption, and I did not investigate. And The War Came, I think, is the name of that Civil War thing that we just saw. This is something that is in development, Korean Crisis and Loose Nukes. I think this is 2 separate games as far as I know. So the John Tyson games look pretty interesting. They are Civil War operational. I love operational. I like Civil War. So they're obviously going to be way less chewy than, say, a GCACW, but it's, So what, right? There's still room for games like that. Vincenzo, thank you so much for the support. It is much appreciated. This too will go toward the campaign to buy Gary better bookshelves so these don't fall and kill me on camera. On the other hand, it'll be great viewing. So for the crowd. So this is Battles. I always want to call it Great Battles of the American Revolution. That's not what the series is called. It is just Battles of the American Revolution. And this is Guilford Courthouse. So Brad says that is in the World at War 85 universe, but it is battalion regiments instead of platoons. Okay, that sounds, well, to me, that's a more interesting scale anyway, but that's entirely taste. This is one of the maps out of the British Way, which is an expansion coming in the pipeline at some point as well. This is Guilford Courthouse again a little later once they started playing it. Medium battles of the American, so-so battles of the American Revolution. Here is Versailles 1919. I've played this twice. It's a good game. I like Churchill a little better, I think, but this is still a pretty good game. And I like this better than Pericles, but that's only because I've yet to figure out Pericles. At some point, I must corner Mr. Herman and get him to explain Pericles to me. This could happen. We could do that. We could have a sacrificial Viking funeral for these shitty bookshelves. So this is Andean Abyss, a coin game that I've personally never played, but it is the first game in the series and obviously started an entire trend. Here is a tiny ASL starter kit scenario that was being played. I'm glad to see that. This is No Question of Surrender, GTS, the Grand Tactical System, and this was some fella's side game on the side. Yes, John C. is quite correct. The British Way is not itself an expansion, but there is an expansion coming for it. And it is basically a quad, and I guess it'll be more than a quad. It'll be like a quad plus when the expansion comes out. This is Herman's, next game, because again, Herman has 2, 3, 5 games a month. So I don't know exactly when this will be coming out, but I have good reason to think it will be out by Origins. This is called Into the Whirlpool, and it is a new series from Herman Luttman. This is on the wheat field at Gettysburg on July 2nd. And Herman said, I got to talk to Herman very briefly on this, and he said it's, I unless I misheard, which is possible, but it's kind of an attempt to have a miniatures-like experience without the miniatures, which I'm all for. This looks very interesting, and I will be delighted to grab this whenever it is available. There you go. Vincenzo's girlfriend is interested in political games like Churchill and Triumph and Tragedy. That's interesting. I consider Triumph and Tragedy much, much more of a war game than Churchill, but, it's all adjacent anyway, right? There's always room for meatballs, William Boardman. Tom MC says that Andean Abyss is great, potentially the best coin game, really holds up. And you can play it online on Rally the Troops. I'm aware of that. I am aware of it because Alexander has played apparently 17 million games of it on Rally the Troops. Here is Undaunted. I'm not sure offhand I remember which Undaunted this was. Because it was not in the war room, it was in the big regular general game room, and the folks playing it had no idea that David Thompson had planned to be there. Unfortunately, David had an issue that came up at the last minute and was not able to make it, so he was missed by everyone who loved David, because anybody who's met David loves David, because he is that good of a guy. But we missed him. We had fun without him. We hope to see him next year. We will, however, see him at Origins for at least a little bit of time. William Aaron says, game titles on a trademark says there's a Compass game named Dawn's Early Light on the War of 1812. Well, they can be trademarked. I just don't know if that one was. And I don't know. You might... I don't know. I'd have to investigate that, and I'm not going to investigate that. Paul Sensel's Alexander's employer is going to blacklist Rally the Troops. That makes his new employer makes complete sense to me. They got in on Wednesday night at, 9:30 or 10 o'clock, something like that. This is true. David, while he was home for the weekend, David did do another 5 games. So this is the Artemis Spaceship Bridge Simulator, which is a riot if you ever get the chance to do it. It is a thing that you can do at home. However, it is much, much more fun at a convention, especially at Buckeye Gamefest, which is the single best place to play this, because if you go do it at Origins, it's like $15 for the slot. It's one of the rather few events that the event still costs separate money from the badge. It's worth it, but you can play it all day for free at Buckeye Gamefest. So that is the place to go. All right. So, Charles Latorre mentions Undaunted 2200, which is, I don't know when it's coming, but I know it's coming. It is the science fiction Undaunted. I'm probably going to grab that. Tom MC also mentions that Plantagenet is now up on Rally the Troops as of a couple of days ago. Meandering Mike says there's no less than 5 games that have used Dawn's Early Light as part of their titles. This does happen all the time, and I don't think it's I am positive that sometimes it is accidental, but I am equally sure that sometimes people just don't care that they're stepping on the name of an older game, and I don't like it when it is done intentionally. Let me put it that way. It also can create significant brand confusion, which I think is undesirable from the publisher's point of view. But they aren't talking to me. There was a whole room of a role-playing stuff that was going on. In particular, there was this game of the One Ring, which didn't have any people sitting at the table when I was there, but I think they were just getting started. I guess I'll also mention there was one game in there that I could not identify. There were 2 tables of Nations and Cannons that were being run by Grant and Alexander, and they combined those at some point in the evening. Once again, I'm told everybody had a fabulous time. Halls of Montezuma. Ooh, that's true. There are at least 2 games called Halls of Montezuma. Here is Rebel Fury. I forget which map this is. I have to figure it out from what's on the map, and I can't read anything at this point. This is a very interesting game that I did not know anything about prior to seeing it on a table here at Buckeye Gamefest. It is called 1714, The Case of the Catalans. And it is a very interesting looking game. I may run this down. It's about 10 years old. Dale Brady, thanks so much. Yet another contributor to the Bookcase Fund. I'm gonna need the big ones, unfortunately. The good news is, I think I'm going to put a Kallax under the window, and I don't need to buy more Kallaxes. I'm covered on Kallaxes. Could be Chancellorsville, but a couple games take place on the same map. A couple of scenarios take place on the same map, I should say. So Dale Brady, once again, thank you so much for the support. It is much appreciated. More for the Bookcase Fund. This is Land and Freedom, a game that has been very warmly received. It is an Alex Knight game, published by, is it Blue Panther? It is Blue Panther, because I haven't had a chance to play it yet. But it looks very interesting. It's kind of a 3-way semi-cooperative deal. I'm not sure that's really selling it, but it is very interesting. It's about the Spanish Civil War. Stuka Joe, thanks for stopping by, says DeVere is the publisher of 1714. Yeah, it looks really neat. And I have flagged it to investigate at a later time. This is a good question, mostly because I don't feel like I have the right tools to make them look really, really nice. And that's a bit more of a concern than anything else. And I don't think it'll necessarily cost me less money to make it myself either, with what would cost nowadays. Jonathan Dyer says that Fourth Circle talked to GMT about using Halls of Montezuma as a counterpoint to their Halls of Tripoli, and reportedly GMT were cool with it. Cool, that's cool. I'm happy about that. They did do a game called The Shores of Tripoli, and the natural companion to that game is the Halls of Montezuma. So it fits with what Fort Circle's trying to do, even if GMT did have a previous game using that title. So, and we'll be talking about that at some point when we talk about the GMT stuff. I'm not sure I knew this. Stuka Joe says Fort Circle is going to publish a deluxe edition of Land and Freedom. Well deserved. I'm glad to hear that. I hadn't heard that. I will corner Kevin Bertram about that when I see him at Origins, however. Ooh, nice. William Boardman says, consider the Havsta bookcases over the Billies. So the trouble with this is I need 9 of them. So the advantage of the Billies is they're modular and they're relatively inexpensive. But they are a particle board, I can tell you that. So it's something that I'll consider, but I gotta pay for this stuff too. And I don't want to be in this basement 2 years from now and have it flood 4 more times. So I will be shooting to get that done. It's not going to be a 1 week project, but it's going to be something I want to get done soonish. All right. So William Aaron says Compass's Dawn's Early Light has a 2020 publication date. So yeah, that sounds approximately correct. I've seen the game, but I haven't really looked at the game. You know what I'm saying? DeVere is also the publisher of the Become a Rock Star designed by Jackie Fox of the Runaways. That sounds fun. Not really my bag, but fun. Perfidious Albion says ditch regular bookcases and use metal shop racks. A lot more sturdy and waterproof. That's true, but if it's upstairs, I'm not worried about waterproof either. And the War Came is going to be coming from through the Blue Panther pipeline, I want to say. But I don't remember, and somebody did tell me, I don't remember whether it was White Dog or Blue Panther proper or Catastrophe Games, one of those three. Carl Fung says he uses Finby from IKEA. I'm gonna make Finby. Let's check on that, Carl. Thank you for the tip on that. Because they don't need to necessarily be deep. All right, here's a miniatures thing that somebody did. I don't know any details about this at all. This is a game that is in development about the Swiss Guard. It was popped up in the video. I don't know much more about it. It is very early and is looking for a publisher from what I gather. Here is Stamford Bridge from the Men of Iron game. This is a terrific series that I'm glad to see will be continuing. Here is, what is this? This is piss. What a War 85, maybe? No, clearly not, because that's Tim from Catastrophe there. So I'm not sure what this is. Brad says that the minis game was a Ukraine game. I did see something about that, but I did not ask. Cool looking map, though. Is this True Command? This is True Command. It's just got way fancier pieces than it had when I played True Command like a year ago with playtest. I don't think this is actually out yet, but it'll be coming pretty soon from Catastrophe Games, who is doing a fair amount of pretty interesting stuff. Here's a big 5 or 6 or whatever it was player game of Here I Stand. Grant and Alexander are in on this too. This is a fantastic game, and this is the kind of venue where it is best played, because you'll be able to get 6 people. This is the dice tower that I bought. Okay. Now, the designer is a Columbus local. It is lined with foam, with closed cell foam, and it is fantastic. This is finally the nice dice tower that I've been wanting to get for years. Now, the guy who makes these does not have any kind of web store, but he does just sell them. So if anyone would like me to give you his, I don't want to post it because I don't think that'd be cool. And if anybody emails me and wants his information, I will be happy to pass that along. This is made from Wenge, which is an African wood, and it is just absolutely beautiful. He does a lot of cool woods. He does Purple Heart and a bunch of other stuff. These are Columbus local. One of the cabs and or BGF fellas builds these. He's been building them for years. This is just gorgeous. I'm delighted with it. What that means, though, is that my big green dice tower, which is not the green dice tower you see in the back of this shot, is going to be repurposed as a traveler dice tower. That green dice tower is going to continue to be my travel dice tower. This dice tower is going to be the one that stays in the nice game room. Here is more shots. This is probably the single best photo I took of the Death Valley game after carefully cropping out all of the glare. We had a lot of fun with this. There's plenty of rules referencing too, don't get me wrong. And these are just more shots of Dead of Winter. If I've said Death Valley, it's Dead of Winter. Bayonet Brand says the Swiss Guard game was designed by Russ from Cardboard Conflicts and was originally a postcard game inspired by Hissy Cat's Postcards from the Front Game Jam. There you go. And that is the last of the photos. So I do have, however, 2 pieces of news that you might be interested in. Actually, 3 pieces of news, but let me get the news that's not me first. So I've got 2 Kickstarters to share. One of which there will be a video from me on in the next, I'm hoping this week, but I ought to actually get the video done. So this is Columbia Games Kingdom of Kanday Kickstarter. I'm going to put a link in the chat to the Kickstarter, so check that out if you want. But I will also do a video that'll be no later than next week, going through some of the contents of this Kingdom book. It's going to be a hardcover book on the Kingdom of Kanday with the Kanday article and some other articles. And it got it hit the Projects We Love Kickstarter thing too, which means it goes on like the Kickstarter front page, which is kind of a big deal. And then you may have seen a fella pop in the chat from time to time. His name is Joe. He is the Greyhawk Grognard. If you check out the Greyhawk Grognard YouTube channel, that's him. He's also the designer of this game, Adventures Dark and Deep, which is a sort of AD&D second edition retro clone, except as Gary Gygax might have done it had he not been booted from the company he founded. It is a very neat, if like first edition AD&D is where you like your D&D, this is definitely worth a look, and I will throw a link to this in the chat as well. Tim, no, yes, that was yesterday. You may have seen this. This was my birthday present. My birthday present from the wife. It is a watch fitness thing, something like that. I don't know, but it's nice. It is. Let's see. So Joe wanted it to feel like not second edition, but like the late first edition books. And I think he has pulled that off with the look that these have. Now, this is a second edition of Adventures Dark and Deep, so it's going to be revised. And Joe has done a video on how he's going to revise it. So we'll be talking about this when that update comes out. Mark Herman's book will hit GMT's P500. And actually, when we talk about that, I'm going to talk about Roger McGowan's book, too, which is also available on pre-order. Greyhawk was sort of. I mean, it did predate the Forgotten Realms, but the Greyhawk that got published was not really the Greyhawk that Gary Gygax ran either. So, John, thanks for stopping by. I've been using my phone to capture steps, but it's not optimal for that because sometimes I'll forget it and leave it in the bathroom or whatever. And sometimes I'll be like cutting the grass on the riding lawnmower and it will decide to count that as steps. This is not doing that so far. And it's a watch. So I can actually get like text messages and stuff on it. So all kind of stuff going on here. So here's all the people that hate me. It's pretty cool. So I don't believe it was a subtle in. I've been actually wanting one. So Castle Greyhawk was like, back in the day, Dave Arneson had his setting Blackmore and Gary Gygax had his setting Greyhawk. But Greyhawk was basically set in a fantasy Gary's version of Greyhawk was basically a fantasy North America. And most of the actual play revolved around the Castle Greyhawk, which was this huge mega dungeon. So, but they eventually released the World of Greyhawk as originally a folio and then later as a box set. And that did predate the, I don't remember the exact dates on any of this stuff. I have a pretty high opinion of the original Forgotten Realms box set, though. I can tell you that. Later material, maybe less good. Roger's book, look, I'm inclined to buy 2 copies so I can cut one one up and frame the photos and put them up on the walls. So Forgotten Realms, I'd have to look into the actual timing, but Forgotten Realms, I want to say was 87, 88, something like that. Remember that the first handful of Forgotten Realms products came out when it was still AD&D first edition. They actually just predated second edition. This segues me into the third news item that I have, which is that we will be doing, because we missed a show, right? So I'm going to make that up. And I had already had the idea, and this is, I guess, a good reason to make it up. go back here. I'm going to do a counter clipping show special at irregular intervals. I think I'm going to firm this up, and you'll know next week. I think the first one's going to be on tabletop role playing games, and this is going to be my avenue for doing a show similar to this that's not about war games. Okay. So the first one's going to be about tabletop RPGs, and I'm shooting for next Wednesday, not this Wednesday, but next Wednesday at basically the same time, but we'll see. Let's see. I'd have to look these up, but this sounds approximately correct to me. Forgotten Realms, the novels. I want to say the first couple novels were released more or less concurrently with the box set, but again, I'd have to look all that stuff up. Then I'm not about to get into a timetable fight over it. I mean, it was kind of a demo. It was a little rough in places, but there are upsides to that. Maybe we'll talk about this on the RPG show. I don't want to sidetrack this show with that. All right, so that's done. Let's close that out, and then we can get into the actual topic only almost an hour in. So I apologize, by the way, for all the squeaking that we're doing. So it's time to talk about GMT, and I haven't really done one of these sort of topical shows on GMT. I kind of did, but not like this. Where we actually look at some of the older games that GMT did when they first got started. And I think that's an interesting exercise, and there's some pretty interesting things happening there. Before we do that, however, I'm going to remind everybody that I do have a Noble Knight affiliate link in the video description. And now that I said this, I need to actually check something, because I think I can make an announcement. A Noble Knight announcement, but I just want to make sure that I'm in the clear to do that. So I'm going to have to check something first real quick here. So we are, yes, Noble Knight's big annual sale is on right now. So if you want to buy stuff from Noble Knight, now is a great time. There's an affiliate link in the video description that will help me out with store credit, and incidentally, get us closer to picking up the finished trilogy from Noble Knight Games as soon as, that credit arrives. So big sale at Noble Knight right now. It will run for a bit. I am not authorized to tell you when it will end. I'm not sure that I even know when it will end, but it will run for at least a week or so. So get in on that action before the stuff all sells out. Brant, thanks for stopping by. Tom MC. So actually, GMT shipped my whatever the latest order was. I think it was just the box and map board for the people, and UPS lost it. They found it today after letting it sit around for like 2 weeks. So hopefully that will arrive in undamaged condition at some point. I have a little more faith in UPS to not damage the box, but I have just as little faith that UPS might lose the box as I would with the U.S. Postal Service. So there's that. Just of Robin Hood and Second Printing Bandits and Tomahawks are the current shipping items from GMT. For the People was the last shipping item, and mine's still in UPS limbo somewhere. I'm not sure what's up with that. All right, so GMT, we're going to start with their very first game. They started releasing games in 1990, and you'll notice immediately that the first several that whole first year worth of games, in fact, were designed by the current head over at GMT, which is Gene Billingsley. So Alistair Logie says that Noble Knight has 16,636 war games. I'm going to field trip up to Noble Knight at some point before the end of the year too, but I do not have a firm timetable for that at all. Let's see here. So if you don't know, GMT was founded in 1990, and they released 3 games in 1990 that I'm able to identify. The 3 founders are Gene Billingsley, Terry Schrum, and Mike Crane. And they named GMT after Gene, Mike, and Terry. That's the origin of the GMT name. But Mike Crane and Terry Schrum left not too long after the company got started to found the legendary Fresno Games Association. which let's say was not known for their high quality or playtesting or editing or proofreading, or games even. But they did not survive, whereas GMT is still around and is furthermore now the industry leader. Silver Bayonet was their very first game. Again, it is a Gene Billingsley design. This is essentially operational Vietnam. This is I'm trying to think of the name. Ia Drang Valley battles is what this is. So if you think of We Were Soldiers, that's this battle. Or this campaign, I should say. And I think this game still holds up. Now, GMT did a 25th anniversary edition of this some time ago that's also really nice. That's the one I have. So this is a game that is pretty well remembered and still pretty well regarded, and I think it's pretty solid personally. Another game that they released, and I see this floating around a fair amount, very cheaply, Airbridge to Victory. This is another Gene Billingsley design. This is on Operation Market Garden. And it's not a bad looking game, but if you like look at these like very early GMT games, you will notice immediately how different the counters look than the more evolved later GMT counters that we've all become so very, very accustomed to at this point. So Jeff Biller says, between October 23rd and November 25th, 1965, a desperate struggle between a full North Vietnamese Army division and the U.S. 1st Cavalry took place west of Pleiku in Vietnam's Central Highlands. Landing Zone X-Ray. There you go. So if you're really into it, want to explore the history, by the way, of that battle, or you have read the book or whatever, this is a very good platform for doing that. But Airbridge to Victory is one of those games that just kind of seems to have dropped off the radar. It's not expensive. I seldom see it for more than $10 or $15, even unpunched. I see a lot of them unpunched. Mo from Mo's Game Table. Mo, thanks for stopping by. I see a lot of these float. Well, I don't want to say a lot, but I do see this with some regularity floating around at a very inexpensive price. And as somebody who is very interested in Market Garden, I have thought about picking it up, and the opportunity does not seem to have presented itself. Let me put it that way. Vincenzo points out that Richard Berg loved to flog Fresno games in his Berg's review of games. But to be fair, Fresno deserved it. I'm just saying. Fresno Games Association deserves it. And Mo will also vouch for Silver Bayonet, which is a very, very solid game. So, folks, before we get any further here, I'm actually not behind on the chat, somewhat stunningly, but it is about the time to hear from the sponsor of the Counterclipping Show, our good friends at Noble Knight Games. So take it away, Noble Knight.
Here at Noble Knight Games, we've been carefully growing the world's largest selection of board games, role-playing games and dice, war games, miniatures and paints, card games, and more. Going on 25 years now. Our rustic castle contains more game and hobby goodness than you can shake a stick at. Complete with careful packaging and the finest customer service the land can provide. You can buy, sell, trade from anywhere in the world, just like nature intended. Noble Knight Games.
Thank you, Noble Knight. We have managed not to screw the video up. That was StreamYard screwing up on my side. Everything seemed to be fine last week on the viewer's side. I went and checked it out afterwards. But yes, usually by the time you get here, Mo, halfway into the show, I am at least 10 and sometimes 30 minutes behind. Somehow I have managed to not do that tonight. Civil War block game I showed a picture of some time back. Tonight? Is that what we're talking about tonight? Because I don't remember a Civil War block game. The Fresno Games Association, Alan Salazar was the name of the company. And they did maybe a dozen games, all of which were really, really exceptionally terrible. So Hexy is here as well. Hexy, thanks for stopping by. And Charles Latorre says Osprey is having a sale. And Osprey does have some interesting things, just anything that I particularly need at this exact moment. So I do have did I do a video on Bobby Lee? Because I've got that. Columbia sent it to me. And if I haven't released that video, I need to release it very soon. I'm reasonably impressed with Bobby Lee, the game from Columbia. There is a Sam Grant that covers the Western Theater as well. This is basically boils it. Mo has just boiled it right down for you here, folks. So we have got 255 people watching at the moment. The metrics on YouTube don't pick up the Twitter viewers, so that's why. So Alistair Logie says that Noble Knight has several copies of Airbridge to Victory, which doesn't surprise me. And you know what? I don't think it's a bad game. I think it's just not super fancy production at this point. And Grant's coming by. I assume this to be Grant, so thanks for stopping by. Graffiti Salvi says that some of the really GMT games were sci-fi based. I think there were a couple of Space Fox games. I'm losing you here, Graffiti Salvi, and I'm afraid. So I don't know what's going on with that. Ooh. This sat around at GMT for quite a long time. I don't know if this is still in stock at GMT or not, but it looks like it looks like a game system with a lot of potential. I would like to play it at some point. I don't know. We'll see when we actually get to it. Where'd my slide? There we go. Slideshow. All right. So the third game that GMT released in their debut year is a game that I have seen people play. This is Operation Shoestring, and it is on Guadalcanal. This is a pretty well regarded but not often talked about today game that probably deserves a little more attention than it's gotten. But, you know, I can understand if GMT doesn't necessarily want to do a new edition of it necessarily. 1914 Offensiva Outrance is 3 maps and roughly 5 counter sheets. I want to say it's a good size game. So Marty says that Graffiti Salvian is thinking of the flagship card game from GMT, which was a financial disaster. I've never heard of this. I've never even heard of this. We'll get to it as we go through the history of GMT here, folks. All right. So Operation Shoestring. A buddy of mine is working on a Guadalcanal game, and he's kind of playing all the Guadalcanal games simultaneously to kind of figure out what they're all doing right and what they're all doing wrong. And this is one of them that's on his table, a local buddy, I will point out. All right, so then we step in, and this, again, all 3 of these games were Gene Billingsley designs. Tim Greenaw says this was the first game he played, and Guadalcanal is an interesting topic. It's a little bit of a difficult, because of the kind of the way the campaign happened historically, where there's the Marines land, there's some fighting, they leave, and then the Marines keep fighting, and then the army shows up, so it's kind of there's some design challenges in modeling this campaign, but I think it can be done. And this is, from what I can tell, one of the more interesting looking ones that I have seen. So I'd rather try this than try the old Avalon Hill Guadalcanal, for example. So then we pass into 1991, and I don't know if we're doing this strictly in chronological order. We're just doing it in order by year. This is Thunder. Excuse me. We need some whiskey to lubricate here, folks. All right. So Scott Rowland, welcome back to the show, says, used to have it, Operation Shoestring, never punched or played it, and eventually sold it. Meandering Mike says, flagship Prometheus and flagship Coyote Sands, designed by Dan Verson. Obviously, I need to look at this. Because here we have Thunderbolt Apache Leader, which is a Dan Verson design. Folks tend to forget nowadays, easy to forget, that this whole Leader series business started at GMT with this game, Thunderbolt Apache Leader. I believe it was revised and republished by Dan Verson Games, and pretty much the cornerstone of Dan Verson Games. I know they do other stuff too, but a huge linchpin of the total output over at DVG is various games in the Leader series, these sort of modern air combat games, although they're not all modern, and nowadays they're not all air games either. But this started at GMT, and we'll see at least one more appearance from Mr. Verson here tonight. And I'm not doing expansions, by the way, because I would have had twice as I'll mention it when we get to it. I'll mention that there were expansions, but we won't be covering the expansions. So next up is one of the games that got expansions very, very quickly. Within a year or two, there were expansions out for this. This is the original Great Battles of Alexander, designer Mark Herman, developer Richard Berg, and later versions of later games in the series, as well as later editions of this, would credit them as co-designers. Now, this original version has 4 battles in it, as you can hopefully see from the graphic: Gaugamela, Issus, Granicus, and Chironea. And these are more or less the big signature Alexander battles. So if you have a more recent version of this, and there have been at least 5 more recent versions of this than this, then you will have a lot more battles. But there are still some people that prefer this original game, which did evolve considerably between then and now. I've actually got this original Great Battles of Alexander, and it's visibly, I have not even tried to play it. I had it back in the day, didn't play it, got it in that inheritance deal that I came across a few years ago and kept it. It's interesting looking. It is noticeably different from current iterations of GBOH and Great Battles of Alexander in particular. So some people might find that this is worth a look. This is in a 1-inch box, by the way, and I really do like this Roger McGowan cover. I think it is very Roger McGowan, but I also think it is very effective. It does kind of say 90s all over it. Moe's Game Table mentions all the expansions for Warfighter. We can't cover all of those. I can't even cover Warfighter Fantasy that John Longshore sent me because the rulebook is like 165 pages and I have no idea what to even do with it. So there is that. I feel like Great Battles of History is kind of one of the signature series of games that GMT has done. And they are monochrome counters too. There's no multicolored fanciness on these counters at all. No, I don't think they really are that different. I think I take it, having only really looked at the fantasy one, the expansions all seem very modular. It's just giving you more stuff to play with, as far as I know. But man, that's a big rule book for the kind of game that it is. So within a year or two, there would start to be expansions for Great Battles of Alexander. And within just a couple of years, there would be a whole new edition of Great Battles of Alexander, Great Battles of Alexander Deluxe, which we will not see tonight because it comes out in 1995 or 6, and I'm cutting tonight off at 1994. Next up is the Forgotten Richard Berg Civil War series. This is the Battles and Leaders series. He did, I think, 4 games in this series, one of which was Chancellorsville Pinnacle of Victory for Clash of Arms, which is not, I do have it. I got it from Noble Knight. It was very inexpensive. It actually looks intriguing, and I mean intriguing in a strictly that sense. It looks interesting. It does not have a good reputation. Chancellorsville, I don't know about this so much, but this is one we never really hear about. There's Gettysburg and Fredericksburg in here, and then a hypothetical Battle of Mine Run. There was an 1862 game, there was Chancellorsville, and there was a 4th one. One of those 4 was published by 1860. I'm trying to remember which ones were published by GMT. Good question, Alan. So let me get to that in a minute. In any case, this is not a particularly highly regarded series, but it is Berg doing Civil War stuff, and I have Chancellorsville, so that's the one I'm going to take a look at whenever I get the chance to do that. This series does not have a sterling reputation. Let's put it that way. Richard Berg was very dependent on development. I think that Victory Games went away as like a Mark can correct me on this. Obviously, I want to say that Victory Games ceased to be an actual independent operating unit operating inside of Avalon Hill around 88 or 89. So that would be prior to the formation of GMT. Yeah, but the trouble is I got to fight my way through a 160-page rulebook to play a fantasy card game. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I mean, I might get to this at some point, but that's a tough ask, in my opinion. Graffiti Salabit says the only other companies that printed Ancients and Medieval was 3W. Decision might have done an odd and end or two as well at the time. But GMT really hit a home run with Great Battles of History as far as I'm concerned. I think it's a great series that has stood the test of time and then some. Alan Salazar asks what my first GMT game was. And that's a great question. and I'm not 100% sure what the answer is. It could have been Vance von Bory's Typhoon, because I had that back in the day. It could have been Rise of the Roman Republic, because I had that back in the day. But what I think it was Vance von Bory's Invasion Sicily, I think. I might be wrong about that. I had Typhoon when it came out, and I got Rise of the Roman Republic when it came out, and I got Invasion Sicily when it came out. So one of those was my first GMT game. So Simulations Design was Richard Berg's company, and of these games that Meandering Mike lists here, 1862 was also in the Battles and Leaders series, along with 1863 and Chancellorsville Pinnacle of Victory. Dead of Winter and First Blood, and I'm not sure about Guns of Cedar Creek, but Dead of Winter and First Blood were great battles of the American Civil War. Dead of Winter is the previous edition of the Dead of Winter we played last week, and First Blood was the previous edition of what GMT published later as Red Badge of Courage in the Great Battles of the American Civil War series. We will get to this one, Panzer Division Lair, but I've never played this, and I've never played this. The Battles and Leaders series does not seem to have been a Berg home run, to be honest. Eric Hans is going to play GBOH Ron tomorrow night. That's cool. I guess with the success of Shogun, I think maybe that's thematically appropriate right now. Next up is Hornet Leader. This is another Dan Versen game, and once again ties into the whole Leader series that DVG has made an entire industry about. These are, generally speaking, not games that appeal to me personally very strongly. But there's no question that they have definitely made a big impact and have been enduringly popular. So Mike Reed says that GBOH suffered in the end with bogged down on playtime as it kept going. Alex moved along. Simple GBOH helped this somewhat. Favorite GBOH was Lion of the North. It really does depend on which game you're talking about. Most of the battles in most of the volumes are pretty small, though. So, I mean, there are big battles. But don't feel like you have to continue if your army is collapsing and you just haven't hit the victory threshold yet, right? I think that is a thing that people kind of assume that they need to play it till the end, till they hit that threshold of route points, and you don't. If your army's falling apart, it's time to call it. So, and Hornet Leader has a Cthulhu expansion. I heard about that, but I don't have any particular interest in checking that out. All right, next up is Volume 2 in the Great Battles of History series. And this one, unlike the previous volume, is a co-credited to co-designers, I should say, credited Mark Herman and Richard Berg. So Berg was involved from the very beginning, but was only credited as a developer on the first edition of Alexander. Now, SPQR here is Roman Republic battles, and at least three of these are from the Second Punic War. This is Beneventum, Bagratus, Cannae, which of course is the big battle where Hannibal absolutely steamrolls the Romans due to incompetent Roman leadership. Zama, which is where Scipio kicks Hannibal's ass, and Cynocephali, which is a bit later. Or maybe earlier actually. But in any case, four important battles of the period, the Republican period. This is a great volume, but again, it's been redone several times by GMT, and at this point, they're into the third or maybe fourth printing of SPQR Deluxe, which contains all of the current edition from GMT, contains all of the expansion material. There's at least 3 or 4 expansions in that box. So the current volume will contain something like 20 battles in it, as opposed to the 5 that were in this original volume. All right, next up then is Crisis Korea 1995. This is another game that nobody really seems to talk much about anymore, but has had an enduring impact because this is the genesis of GMT's Next War system. Mitchell Land took this system, this Gene Billingsley design, and turned it into Next War Korea, which has been through a couple of editions at this point. But the genesis of the system is with this 1992 Gene Billingsley release. So I feel like if you've got a copy of Next War Korea, you probably don't need this, unless you are collecting it, I suppose, in which case it's a free country, or if you want to see how the system evolved between this original iteration and the later volumes in the series. We will not get to any late. Well, we'll see. Yeah, I take that back. We got at least one more GBOH game in us tonight. So Mark McNair says he thinks Alexander was his first GMT game, but he got it much later. So the version of Alexander I had back in the day was the deluxe version, which is in the 2-inch box, not the original one. I have that now, however. So Mo says this is their best system in Mo's opinion. I think it's a really solid system. Given topical interest in modern stuff, I think it's a very solid system. It's got a wonderful air system that I really would like to explore. I also really like a number of the other game systems that GMT does, however, including GBOH, Great Battles of History, Great Battles of the American Civil War. I really like the East Front series from Vance von Boris. Mitch, this was a more straightforward deluxeification, though, where I would characterize Next War Korea as a reimagining of Crisis Korea 1995. Maybe reimagining is slightly too strong of a word, but they did retitle it too, right? I know Mitch was involved in the redo of Silver Bayonet 2, and I've got the 20th anniversary edition. It's really nice. Eric Goebel just got rid of SPQR plus some expansions and picked up Ukraine 43. We're seeing a little more action in Central Ohio on the topic of GBOH too. Perfidious Albion says Caesar is the Civil War, as the opponents are nearly equal in quality, unlike SPQR, in which so Carthaginians though, right? There's at least one barbarian battle in there, as I recall, but at least two of those battles were against Carthaginians, where the two armies are quite different, but they're not necessarily, it's not organized Romans versus a barbarian horde. Let me put it that way. So, Mo points out that the only problem with Next War is it's very tough to stay current with so many changes in modern militaries, particularly with several wars raging right now. This is it too granular though? Is it too granular? I'm not convinced of that. But that said, they have not done this either, which is the actual Next War. So Central Ohio is a great place to be in wargaming. Let me put it that way. So the 25th anniversary, it's the same game, right? They cleaned it up and they added some stuff. There's like some extra scenarios and all the components are nicer. But as far as I'm aware, and I've never really examined the original in detail, and I'm happy to be corrected, they're not fundamentally different games. Nice. Paulo Farrell says his first GMT game was Space Empires 4X, which is a fantastic game. And this is true, of course, what Ed Holtzman points out. Modern games are always going to be subject to change as new information becomes available, right? All right, so next up is Operation Mercury. Now, this is another Gene Billingsley. So I don't have this. I've never had this. I couldn't find a rulebook online. The design credit on the box says Gene Billingsley and Vance von Boris. This is Operation Mercury, the airborne invasion of Crete in 1941. There are a number of games on this. I have at least 3 of them personally, but I do not and have never owned this. This is another Roger McGowan. I'm not positive that any of these are not Roger McGowan covers. This is definitely a Roger McGowan cover. This one I'm not sure about because it doesn't say. This is definitely Roger. This one I'm not sure about it because it doesn't say. This is Roger. This is Roger. This one, again, I'm not sure about it because it doesn't say. This is Roger. This is Roger. This is Roger. So Roger is well represented on these first several years of GMT games. Let me put it that way. Now I got to get back to where I was at, though. So this is one, this being Operation Mercury is not one that I'm particularly familiar with. There have been a fair number of games on that. There's Mercury Market Garden, which came out from Worthington in the early days of Worthington. Both, I will tell you, Mike Reed, that both Operation Mercury, this game, and Arctic Storm, at least according to BGG, released in 1992. Arctic Storm may have come out earlier, but I have no way to tell that from the list. So offhand, there's of course Air Assault on Crete. There's another one from Avalon Hill that with a similar title, which is actually Air Assault on Crete. I forget which one is which, actually. Air Assault on Crete is the Avalon Hill one. There's also Descent on Crete, which is the SPI monster. It's big enough to be considered a monster. It was a double flat game, but it was never released in the soapbox, as far as I'm aware. And there's the TCS Crete game, which is Eagles from the Sky. There's Operation Mercury for GTS, which is a Joe Chacon game, as I recall. And I've got that, have not played it. There's Paratroop, which was my first war game of any kind. One of the 3 mini games in Paratroop is Crete. So there's been a fair number of games on this topic. This one seems to have gotten more or less lost in the shuffle. Operation Mercury from MMP was on I missed it if it was. I saw No Question of Surrender, though. Mike Reed says Descent on Crete used the Highway to the Reich system. That's not necessarily a selling point for those of us with problems with Highway to the Reich. Ooh, yeah, that's true. John C. mentions the No Retreat North Africa Crete extension. Was that in the GMT version, though? Because those are the only ones that I've ever had. I've never owned the original early ones. Oh, this is true, too. Marina Mercure, the Europa game, does cover this, but, I mean, it's not a satisfying... It's 2 turns, right, in that game. So I wouldn't put this in quite the same category. Let me put it that way. Hunters from the Sky. I think that's what I said, wasn't it? It might not have been. That's the TCS Crete game, which I also have, and which we came actually really close to playing at some point last year, and it never quite materialized. All right, so next up is Arctic Storm. So this is an interesting looking game too. This is obviously about the Winter War part of the conflict between Finland and the Soviet Union during World War II. And the interesting thing here to me is the designer is David James Ritchie, who was one of the, as far as I'm aware, the only person who worked for SPI and who later ended up being part of the staff as opposed to a freelancer at TSR after TSR took over. Now, I don't think there was a direct path there. From what I understand, he had left SPI and then later went to TSR. And unfortunately, it is the late David James Ritchie. He is no longer with us. So Mo, of course, has got some Noble Knight spring sale deals. Mo, I hope you used my affiliate link. SPI Mega Crete game was just Malamé. I didn't think this was the case, but I've never taken a particularly close look at Descent on Crete either, so I could be easily mistaken. So this box cover does not really sing to me, but the map's not terrible looking from what I saw. This is another one of those like early GMT efforts that nobody really says much about anymore at this point, although it has been mentioned on this stream before. Well, TCS is platoons, though, and I'm not sure what the scale of Descent on Crete is. It's companies in the case of the GTS Operation Mercury, because that's a company system. So here we have Volume 3 of the Great Battles of History series. This is Lion of the North. And once again, this is a co-design by Mark Herman and Richard Berg. In this case, there's only 2 battles. This is Lutzen and Breitenfeld. And it seems to me that I don't know if this was kind of a decision that got made or not. But the Great Battles of History pretty quickly after this decided as a system that it wasn't going to do anything other than ancient or maybe medieval in a few cases where there are some correspondences between ancient and medieval warfare. Okay, so this Lion of the North topic is something that we will never see again. The coverage of this era has more or less been taken over by Musket and Pike, which is itself, I would say, a game system that's inspired by GBOH and some other previous Richard Berg stuff. So there you go. There you go. Mo, the kickback will be delivered in the form of whiskey. How about that? I do have all of the GBOH games, and this was the last one to make it to my collection. Not because it's exceptionally hard to find, although it's hard to find at a cheap price that I was willing to pay for it. This was the last to arrive because this is the least relevant in the entire series, because there have been many other more modern takes on these particular battles than, and I think you're better off putting it a different way. I think you're better off going with something like Musket and Pike, for if you're interested in this particular topic than you are hunting down Lion of the North. Let me put it that way. So yeah, that's true. So a big part of the design thesis of GBOH is to show how different weapon systems and different tactical doctrines interact. Okay. And as warfare evolves, you have one side using one tactical doctrine and weapon system and the other side using some other combination. How does that work? And that's what GBOH is designed to illustrate. There you go. Just got charged for Invasion Malta. Speaking of Vance Von Boris. There you go. Been waiting for this for quite a while, actually. So I have it. This is, however, I think best considered a novelty piece at this point. If you are a completionist, and at the point at which I have like the other 16 game or whatever it is in the series, I might as well get this one too. But I can't really recommend that people run down copies of Lion of the North at this point. I will mention, I guess, in passing, that if you search eBay for Lion of the North, you will get a variety of different items. This is only one of them. For example, there's an Ars Magica source book called Lion of the North for no good reason. That will also turn up in that search until you apply additional filters to it. So next up after that is the Down in Flames series. And once again, this is a Dan Versen design. Now this, I see people playing. I saw some people playing this at Compass Expo a couple of years ago. And I think this Down in Flames still gets played at Consim World in Tempe, Arizona as well. There you go, Mo. I thought you didn't do Ancients, Mo. Or am I thinking of Civil War? I could be thinking of Civil War. But that looks good, and I would like to play it, but I don't have a tight plan at this point. And I won't have a plan for anything until after Origins, to be honest, because there's enough stuff between Origins and everything else going around out here that's not hobby related, and the CSRs. I am not going to have time to deal with any of this until after that. So I can't really tell you a lot about Down in Flames, except to observe that you can get these games relatively inexpensively. I don't know about this particular one, but you can find a Down in Flames game relatively inexpensively and relatively easily. Next up is what I would characterize as not a great cover due to contrast issues with the purple, and the sort of the word lost is kind of getting lost on this cover, for example. This is Lost Victory, Manstein at Kharkov. This is another David James Ritchie design for GMT, and this is one that I have heard some decent things about, but it does not appear to get a lot of attention nowadays. But I do hear it come up and is mentioned occasionally. Old issues of C3I are going for bananas money, if you ask me. Ancients Curious. There you go, Mo. That's one way to put it. And Thin Red Line's doing good stuff. I'm impressed with their design approach in general, and Operational Ancients. I'm all over that. There was no way I was not going to jump on that. So Lost Victory, not a lot of talk about it, but to be honest, other than the GBOH games, none of the games on this list are getting a lot of talk nowadays. Next up is another David J. Wait a minute. This is Out of Order. This is another David James Ritchie game, however, that might be confused with a Ted Racer game called Plan Yellow, I think, or Case Gelb, maybe. But Ted did a game on this basic topic as Did he? Yeah, I thought so. I might be getting that mixed up. In any case, Victory in the West here. Confusing name because there's a whole SPI series called Victory in the West. And there's another game somewhere floating around called Victory in the West. But this is France 1940. I don't know a whole lot about this game. My personal choice of game on this topic is the Blitzkrieg Legend, the OCS game, because I think OCS does a really good job of modeling the greater operational efficiency of the Germans in this particular campaign over the equally, on paper, powerful army that the French had, right? So, Case Yellow. Yeah, okay. That's the game I'm thinking of. And that's a pretty, there's a lot of people with high opinions of that game. I am not sure that this game is worse. This may have just been lost in the shuffle of a couple of different games. Because remember, GMT's done at least 3 games on this topic. This, the Case Yellow game from Ted, and France 40 from Mark Simonich. And of those, it may be that the Simonich game has sucked all the oxygen out of the room. So, Mike Reed says that David James Ritchie had several near misses for GMT. Now, I'll mention that he did a bunch of work for D&D, too, working for TSR. So there's that. And there may have been a Spitzer game or two that was designed by him as well. Although I'd have to double check that. So, get a good amount of counters done, but boy, I got a lot of counters for this game left to clip. All right, next up is Britain Stands Alone. This is interesting for a couple of reasons. One, it's a hypothetical. It's going to be the first straight hypothetical that GMT did, although 1863 does have a hypothetical scenario, and this is exactly what it sounds like. This is Operation Sea Lion. The British are defending against a German invasion. Cool cover. This is a Jim Werbineth design. And if anybody has any questions about it, let me know, because Jim is my roommate for Origins this year. So we'll be hanging out with Mr. Jim, and I got some favors to ask of him on my own as well. But this is a game that I do still hear people occasionally mention as a good Sea Lion game. This is back in 1994, so it is old at this point, but I have taken a peek at the components, and they're not bad looking. So, Brian Jarvis, I certainly am not your guy when it comes to this question in general. I have 2 games that feature Sea Lion, other than like strategic level World War II games where it's a thing that could happen. I've got the Decision Sea Lion that they did a year or so ago, and I've got Their Finest Hour, which has a Sea Lion scenario. That's basically all I got. So John Nolan says that Ted's Case Yellow is more of a sim. Great learning game for Case Yellow. Okay. Stacking Limit says Britain Stands Alone is better. I'm prepared to believe that. Alistair Logie says, don't know what the big fuss was. Throw out a beach boat. Well, so I mean, the probably the takeaway for Operation Sea Lion is that there was no reasonable way it was going to happen without complete air supremacy on the Germans' part, which they never achieved. And to be fair, the Germans realized that as well. So next up, we're almost at the end of the list here. So we're going to finish a little bit early. I stopped at 1994. Maybe I should have gone through 1995. That's okay. We'll have a part 2, not next week, but we'll have a part 2, and we'll pick up 1995 and see how far we get. Normally, I shoot for 20 games on these list-type shows. All right, so this is what I call Great Battles of Julius Caesar, but the title just says Caesar, the Civil Wars. But it's Great Battles of Julius Caesar, and this is the Civil Wars, Caesar's Civil Wars. There's a bunch of Roman Civil Wars, right? So the battles here are, and again, this has been recently redone by GMT, and this thing was an absolute bitch to find for a long time. I had this back in the day. I got rid of it like a dope. I reacquired it a few years ago, and like the week later, after I got it, GMT comes out and says, I will be bringing it out in a new edition. So I got that too. So this is Pharsalus, Dyrrhachium, Thapsus, Ruspina, and Munda. Of those, the only ones I know anything about are Pharsalus and Dyrrhachium and Thapsus. Pharsalus is, of course, the big battle between the armies of Caesar and Pompey. The big decisive battle. Afterwards, Pompey. After that, Brutus and Cassius commit suicide, and Pompey flees to get executed by the youngster over in Egypt, which did not make Caesar pleased. So, but let's see here. Make sure that I have not seen this. I've seen where there was Discord, but I have not seen Dad's Army. So, but in any case, this is a very differently complected kit than SPQR, because, as was mentioned previously, this is Romans on Romans here, right? You're not against Romans versus Carthaginians or Romans versus miscellaneous barbarian Nimrods. These battles are pretty evenly matched. You will get to see a lot of late Republic legions against late Republic legions. It's a fascinating period. I think this was something I definitely wanted to reacquire, and then when I did, and I think I have an extra set of most of it actually, but it's another thing I got to go through. But now I get the new one, which I haven't touched yet. Incidentally, while I was gone, my $125 order of Cube for Me counter trays showed up, so I've got a nice stock of those as well. Also, you will be seeing another video on the latest counter trays from Aegis. They've got 2 new types of counter trays that Ed over from Aegis was kind enough to give me some samples of at BGF, and they're really cool. They're really cool. Let me put it that way. And one of them fulfills a niche that the Cube for Me trays do not. So, all right. So Mike Reed says, was a playtester, graphics, fought 3 BOW, 3 Battles of Waterloo? Is that what we're talking about here? Well, that is this game. Was a playtester, graphics, fought the players, needed to be an aid to command, too much all alike. Better game than its Triumph and Glory progeny if you could get over the graphics. So remember that Triumph and Glory eventually migrated its way to France and to designer Frederick Bay to become the Jour de Gloire series. And I think that if you grabbed any of the 2 or 3 Triumph and Glory games that GMT did and you liked them, the only other place to go is the Frederick Bay Jour de Gloire series. So, which are a little hard to get now, but GMT carries Vevictus, so they've got a bunch of them. So I'm very impressed with them. Let me put it that way. There'll be a separate video. So I really like the Cube for Me trays too, but the mag I don't have them handy, so I'm not going to bust them out. Watch the video when it comes out. You'll see it. There's half-size trays and magazine game trays, and I'm impressed with both of them. So Eric Goebel says, Ancients do not ring his bell, but he wants to play Al Nafi's Imperium Romanum, an absolutely unique wargaming experience. There's nothing quite like it. It's one of those sort of singular games that there's really nothing to directly compare it to. So, okay, so on to the Battles of Waterloo. Okay, so this is what it sounds like. This is the 100 days in 4 battles, and I think there's a combo battle where you can play Lindy and Quatrebrad together. It's not graphically pleasing looking game, and they never followed it up with any additional stuff directly. But Berg later would redo, as has been mentioned, or would do the Triumph and Glory series, which there were at least 2 volumes from GMT. There's a Borodino, and one of them was called Triumph and Glory and had like 3 battles in it. And that is said to have been a fairly interesting system. One of the things that, so Mike Reed says that Bill Ramsey did a good update to Battles of Waterloo, but it got no love from GMT. Mo says the magazine ones will see. Yeah, they will. They will. They're really nice. The half-size ones will be super handy as well. Charles Latour said Worthington included a counter tray with their new Gettysburg. All the counters fit, but no locking mechanism on the tray. That's undesirable. Worthington's trays have always been an issue with locking. Trays that don't lock are just not work. So sometimes the tray doesn't have a lid, right? One of the things that was in the consignment store was back at Buckeye Gamefest, so that's great. I didn't buy anything there. One of the things that was in that consignment store was a copy of The Age of Napoleon, which is an old Renaud Verloc game, was published by Phalanx and or Mayfair back in the day. And it's not a bad game, but it's got one of those blow molded generic plastic trays in the box with no lid. And I don't know why anyone thinks a lid would be optional. Because I guess it's a big flat box. Maybe they assume people are going to store it flat, but I tend not to store games flat because I could store more games putting them on their sides. So Mike Reed says the maps were great, counters were overcrowded and a mess. That's very plausible. And Mike Reed says Waterloo and Lindy worked for the level they were aimed at. Now here's the question, though. I think this is approximately the same size game as in terms of like components, about the same physically sized game as Napoleon's Last Battles. Okay. And yet I kind of like Napoleon's Last Battles more than what I see from Battles of Waterloo here. So I don't know if Berg had some experimental idea that he was trying out, which is possible. Berg was known to do that. Or if it was just, he wanted to do a Waterloo game, and this is what he came up with. So, I strongly dislike using rubber bands or painter's tape on the trays. The lids should stay on their own, right? And that is not a problem. It has been a recent problem with GMT trays for some reason. It has never been a problem with. It was a problem back in the day with like the SPI trays too. Not a problem with the Cube for Me trays, not a problem with the Aegis trays. So at this point, it is not my intention to bash the GMT trays, because Lord knows I've been using them for decades. But at this point, of those three manufacturers I just listed of counter trays or places you can get counter trays, between GMT, Cube for Me, and Aegis, the GMT is the third best. Okay, both Aegis and Cube for Me are doing a better job than GMT is with their traditional trays that they've had for the last 25 years. So, and I bought in, I don't know, a sale a year or two ago. I bought another 20 GMT trays, and like half the lids don't snap on. And they're right out of the box from GMT, and half the lids don't snap on. I'm not sure what's up with that. I'm not going to call GMT on the phone and yell at them. That would be asinine. But I may well not buy any more GMT counter trays. To be fair, however, more GMT trays arrive than I need, right? I mean, if I buy a game, chances, if it's punched already, chances are pretty good it's in a GMT tray. If I rearrange a game to use another kind of tray, hey, I got a extra GMT tray. So I don't feel like I'm going to need to buy GMT trays anytime soon, even though even aside from the fact that I just bought and received in the span of a couple of weeks, I don't know, like 25 Cube for Me trays, plus the stuff that Aegis gave me too. So the deep dish trays, so the lock and load deep dish trays are nice, but we're only able to get them in that like ammo crate thing. And I don't think that's available anymore. The DVG deep dish trays, as Mo has pointed out here, were fit only for the dumpster. Absolute garbage. I would love it if DVG would sell their deep dish trays individually. I think that would be great. And I would probably buy some, because there are certainly situations where they would be handy. So, well, that wasn't a problem I ever noticed years ago, though, that the lids don't snap on suddenly. I realized that they've been making them for years, and sometimes you'll have a new lid with a tray that's been sitting around for a decade, and maybe that's why. That's fine. But I don't want to deal with that, and I don't have to, because I can buy trays from Aegis or Cube for Me. So, okay, so these, Ed Holtzman, are, if you are talking about what I think you are talking about, these are going to be the trays that were manufactured by Chessex. These are still available. There are, they're all made in China. Or I don't know about the Cube for Me trays or the Aegis trays, but the GMT ones are definitely made in China. So I think the trays that Ed Holtzman is talking about here are the ones from Chessex. So these resemble the old Avalon Hill / Victory Games counter trays somewhat, except that instead of a separate unlocking lid that did nothing except make you think your counters wouldn't end up all over the place, you could paperclip them together or tape them together or whatever to keep them shut, but I don't like to do that. The Chessex tray's advantage, so the disadvantage is the hinge, okay? The older trays, the hinge would be so tight that if you opened it, it would just close again. Or worse, it would do this, and your counters would be all over the friggin' place. Let me knock this slideshow down at this point. The new ones lay open more or less flat, but I still don't particularly like them. I think they've got a lot of pop to them when you open them. They do, however, fit in Avalon Hill and Victory Games boxes, which regular GMT trays will not do unless you trim them. One of the Cube for Me sizes, I think it's the 25 compartment tray, will fit in an Avalon Hill or Victory Games box. So, Eric Goebel, thank you so much for the contribution to the Bookshelf Fund. And I've made a note to myself to check out the Finby bookcases from IKEA as well, per Carl. So we'll be checking that out, but I'm probably going with the Billies. Because remember, the first thing to go upstairs is going to be the RPG stuff, and this shit is heavy. So bear that in mind. But thank you for the support and the contribution. It is much appreciated. Catapult trays, I'm not a big fan. I've got tons of trays. I've probably got 20 or 30 GMT trays sitting around. I now have 20 or 30 Cube for Me trays sitting around. I've got 5 new Aegis trays that I just got, and those are definitely going to get used. I will definitely be first doing magazines in them, I can tell you that. The magazine trays are really nice. The other magazine, and that's a niche nobody else is doing except for Against the Odds. Now, I have the highest opinion of Against the Odds as a magazine and as publishers, but those counter trays that they make are trash. I would just, as soon as they walk in the door, they go right in the dumpster. I don't even hang on to them. They are absolutely garbage. So, well, in fairness, Vincenzo, we did go through about an hour and a half of GMT games before we talked about the trays. So hey, if the lids fit, cool. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with the GMT trays. And Here I Stand is not a difficult game to store. So you're going to be fine. Although I got to tell you, I'm as a non-large fan of Maggie storage. Here I Stand and the Napoleonic Wars are 2 games that I am happy to store in baggies, because what I do is I say, you are the French, here's your bag, and that's it. Because it's basically, in the bag is a couple of liters and a bunch of strength points anyway, and maybe a couple of markers. So my wife got me some of these like plastic clamshells for that I had on an Amazon wish list or something for Christmas, and I haven't used any of them yet. They might be useful for magazines or Ziplocs or something like that, but I haven't really made the determination how to use them yet, and they're kind of expensive for what they are. So this is a good idea. Low profile Cube for Me trays and magazine bags. So the other interesting thing the cool thing about Cube for Me, and Aegis is going in this direction too, and I'm delighted about that, is the customizability, right? There are multiple different sizes of trays you can get from Cube for Me. You can get 20 compartment trays, or 12 compartment trays, or 25 compartment trays, and a variety of other sizes as well. Sometimes they'll be full-size trays, sometimes they'll be like 2/3 size trays. So one game I managed to store, how easy is it going to be for me to get this off the shelf? Yeah, it's kind of out of the way. Oceans of Fire. There's a lot of stuff in that. Using Cube for Me trays, I managed to get everything in there, cards and all. So I was very pleased with that. I will it depends on the game. I will I will more often use baggies on a magazine game just for compressibility, right? Mike Reed, send me this via email. You can't put a link in the chat here. Thank you, YouTube. But send me the link to that. I think I may have seen that. That may be worth an investigation for this project. Yeah, it's the different sizes that really make it. Different thicknesses, different sizes, different configurations. Tremendous increase in flexibility and customizability. John Haas, thanks for stopping by. John was one of our players in the Dead of Winter game. John, I'm glad you had fun. I had a lot of fun, even though I rolled so shitty that I threw the dice across the room at least once. So John says that thanks for posting the pictures for a week-long game. That was his best prolonged series of rolls ever. It was far from my worst. John had, let's say, a streak of pretty rotten luck playing La Bataille last year. This year, John rolled pretty well. So, and exceptionally well on rally rolls, too. So, I don't really think they are that... I mean, if you're buying them 100 at a time, yeah, they're going to be expensive. But, I mean, individually, I don't know that I think they're that expensive. And remember that the capacity on the Aegis trays are bigger than the capacity of the compartments on the GMT trays. That's a significant factor, in my opinion. So... Now, I tend to buy baggies, I got to tell you, from Walmart because it's in their arts and crafts section, and you just go buy the baggies. They have a variety of different sizes, some of which are suitable for counters, some of which are suitable only for heroin. But they do have a large number of different baggie sizes, and they are incredibly cheap. So I have not even attempted to buy those from Amazon, although... You know, you'd think they'd have something comparable, right? These, I have a whole huge bag of those somewhere. These are the biggest ones that I get from Walmart, and these are about 4x6 or so. So, and I more often use the smaller ones. But... I accidentally bought the tiny heroin baggies one time, but have since found a use for them, just not as a use for as many of them as I bought, frankly. Well, you know what, though? If you're using a standard baggie size, so what? So what? I'll take 1,000 standard size baggies, right? So... Snack baggies from the Dollar Tree. So those are just like standard, like Ziploc snack baggies. I use those for war games too sometimes. But what I will typically use those for is if I have baggies that are storing counters and then I want to group some of the baggies together. Like I did this with Great Battles of Alexander, where I like put, say, the Roman, that's a bad example. I put, say, the one nationality of light infantry in a small baggie, and another nationality of light infantry in another small baggie, and then at the end I put all the light infantry together in one sandwich bag. So 1x5x2 is a pretty similar to the standard size baggies that GMT was putting in. I think that is a very serviceable standard size. For most purposes, right? I'll use bigger bags for something like, again, Here I Stand or Napoleonic Wars, where it's kind of like a general counter mix of strength points, and I could just hand somebody the blue counters or whatever. So I have not seen those plastic trays at Dollar Tree anytime recently, and every time we go to Dollar Tree, I check on it, but I haven't seen those anytime recently. I have a couple extras. But at this point, I got this huge stack of Cube for Me things, so I'm good. I think we were in a Dollar Tree that had 0 employees actually working in it at that time, and not very long ago, to be honest. At least that's what it felt like. Yeah, this is pretty good. I can see why the bourbon people like this stuff. It's very sweet. It's definitely wheated. It is small batch, so there's a batch number on here. So, your small batch might be a different small batch from mine. It might taste totally different. That's the The interesting thing about single cask whiskey is that, maybe it'll be amazing, maybe it'll be less amazing, but you might not be able to get that experience again. And at some point, we will be relocating the ASL from this nook where it's over here. That's probably going to end up on the cow axes out in the game room, to be honest. That is probably enough space for it. And a lot of it's in plastic containers, so they're not going to get damaged if they just get a few drops on them. So I'll be okay. So only Wargamers, 20 minutes on baggies. Don't be shocked. These are valuable pieces of information, Mike, that people need to know how to employ their baggies to store their tiny things. So, and we have not, I feel like every episode is we people ask about counter clippers all the time, so I do end up answering those questions about counter clippers, and those questions get asked on Facebook, and when they do, I just paste in the link to my video about counter clipping, not this show, but the video I did about counter clippers. Now, I got to get the 3D printer working again, okay? Because I need those tray dividers. I've designed a couple additional tray dividers since then. I need more 3D printed counter trays and spacers. So we are going to try and work on that over the next couple of weeks. We'll see, though. It's, time is killing me. So it did occur to me. At one point, I was saving them, and then I built up an entire mason jar, and my wife saw it, and she said, "What the fuck are you doing?" So I threw it away. So it did occur to me that you could, with some paraffin or something like that, you could create little fire starting discs with the counter clippings. But that's a little crazy, right? That's like saving your toenail clippings. It's a little too weird even for me. And I am okay with weird, obviously. Now, I got the super heavy duty bags from the Container Store at one point, and I don't like them. Baggies are cheap. I'm not worried about that. Ooh, I've seen this. So Plano also came out with, not that recently, but, somewhat recently, I guess, a thinner version of their regular Plano big heavy duty trays. I always felt like those were really way too bulky to use for most wargaming purposes. But I know plenty of people who, to this day, put their ASL stuff in those things. I just think they're awfully bulky. But the thinner Plano trays are actually, I thought, pretty useful. I may have to take a look at 2-inch deep clippy storage boxes. I don't have a Dollarama here, obviously, in Ohio, but I have not been incredibly great. Here's why. The clipper is super squeaky, so I've been clipping a little less tonight. That said, I probably got a whole counter sheet clipped tonight, so I'm happy with that. If I get 200 counters clipped, or 280 counters clipped, there's probably about 200 clipped here. I am happy with that. So I'd like to find, I got it. You know what? It's not even WD-40. I just have to take it apart and clean it. That's what it is. But that will involve some WD-40. I do use WD-40 for that. WD-40 is an excellent solvent, and will remove schmutz from your stuff. So this is interesting. So Dan and I don't know if we'll have a guest tomorrow on the show with Dan or not. If not, we might just talk about our respective convention experiences, because he went to Stack Academy over the weekend. I'm very proud of him. He actually left the house and went to a game convention, finally. I think Jason Matthews was there. Dan's got a video of it, so I haven't watched it, but we'll see. But we'll hopefully, I didn't really do loot. So the scene, so I bought 4 games from Blue Panther, 3 Hollenspiels and a White Dog. I traded off the swap table. So if you are an attendee at BGF, you get a free game. It is something remaindered out of Rio Grande Games' remaindered warehouse. So typically that's not my thing, but they usually have a take a game, leave a game table. somebody threw a copy of the old 3M stocks and bonds on the take a game, leave a game table. So I was happy to hand over whatever random Rio Grande thing that BGF had given me and took stocks and bonds home. I haven't checked whether it's there or not. The other thing that I picked up was this amazing Wenge dice tower, which I am absolutely infatuated with. It's just check out that beautiful wood. I guess this is a difficult wood to work with too. So I am delighted with this. And again, if anybody would like Scott's information so they can get themselves one of these in a variety of exotic woods, let me know and I will pass that information along. I do not wish to broadcast it on the air because I think that would be weird. And I will encourage him to get an Etsy storefront or something like that. Reasonably priced. This was, I consider this to have been a clerical error at $75 onto this particular wood. Let me put it that way. But most of his towers are $50 to $75. A couple of them are more expensive because they're more exotic wood. But this is potentially true, and I might investigate this, actually. There is no link. I will have to give you an email address, which I will be happy to do. Just send me an email, ardwulfslair@gmail.com, and I will pass that along. Like I said, he does not have a storefront, or a digital storefront. So there's no website for me to send you to, but I will give you his information. And I told him I would be doing that. So that is okay. So anyway, but yeah, no, they're nice. And I would encourage you to grab one, and I'll buy another one, to be honest about it, next time I see the guy. But I've also got some bookshelves to buy too. So my wooden one that I made is made out of plywood. It's basswood plywood, which is the hobby plywood stuff that you buy at Joann Fabrics or Michael's or whatever. So I like mine. It's nice, but boy, this is nicer. So, we'll be repainting that as the Traveler Dice Tower. I want to mention very briefly before we hang up, that I did run a classic Traveler game for May Day on Wednesday, May 1st. May Day is, of course, the day on which we celebrate Traveler because May Day, this is Free Trader Beowulf. And I think 3 people now have told me that it was one of the highlights of their convention. So assuming that Traveler May Day is on May 1st, it's May 1st. Assuming that falls in BGF next year, we'll be doing that again. And I thought it went really well. I was kind of stressed about it going in because I didn't feel prepared, and it was fine. Everybody had a good time. I had a good time. We had a cool ending and everything. So I was very happy with the way that turned out. So, all right, folks, everybody have a great night. We'll be back tomorrow with the show with Dan at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. And I hope to have at least 2 more videos out this week. One will be a Harn video about the Harn Kickstarter. And the other one will be the unboxing of OCS Luzon, which you would have seen last week if we had any bandwidth at the Greater Columbus Convention Center at all. I got it before I left. It looks good. I have a video. I just needed to edit it and upload it, and I didn't get a chance to do any of those things. So everybody have a great night. Once again, thanks for all the support. If you'd like to help the channel out, there's a bunch of ways to do that. Probably the best way to do that is through the Patreon. We're going to need to buy some new shelves to relocate the office with, so the support will be appreciated. And there's the Noble Knight affiliate link, and special thanks to Noble Knight and to the patrons of Ardwulf's Lair, without whose assistance and encouragement we wouldn't be able to do any of this stuff. So everybody have a great night. We'll see you all next week or tomorrow if you're there tomorrow.